Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'm Sam, an alcoholic. This is a one-speaker meeting, and please welcome our speaker tonight, Pete K.
Hi, my name's Pete. I'm an alcoholic. It's great to be here tonight, and congratulations to the people who celebrated birthdays. Congratulations to the people who took chips. Welcome to the newcomers who identified, and to the newcomers who didn't identify. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sorry it's come to this, but here you are. You might as well stay. You're going to end up here anyway. I didn't want to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. I had other problems. I had problems other than alcohol. I had employers. I had family. I had creditors. Those were my problems. I figured a few bucks would take care of me. So, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. The first time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous was 1981. And then I came through the 80s for a while, and I came in the beginning of the 90s. I didn't get sober till 1992, so I'm not a quick study in Alcoholics Anonymous. But since that day, November 10th, 1992, that I stayed, my life has gotten better. My life has gotten relentlessly better in areas that I didn't think it was going to happen. You know, I'm a kid. I was raised in the Bronx by a small family of Jewish martyrs. Yeah. And the only thing we did, we suffered and we felt unappreciated for all the great acts we performed for other people. My father was a doctor. He was a real kind doctor. He made house calls. He was always out doing stuff. My mother worked with him. I have a brother who's 2 years older than me. He became a doctor like my father. I just became an unlicensed dispenser of medication. I didn't know I was going to like alcohol. I really had no idea I was going to like alcohol. But there was a holiday, and it was a holiday at which a lot of wine is consumed, and I had 4 glasses of wine, and then I had some more wine, and the next thing I knew, I came to, and my head was in the lap of Veronica Klein. And for those of you who don't know Veronica Klein, she was the most beautiful girl that I knew in that Bronx. You know, she had big brown eyes and big lips, and she had long brown hair, and she was rubbing my forehead saying, "Pete, is there anything I can do for you?" So I chased that for 35 years, you know. I probably did as well that night as I was going to do in the rest of my drinking career. I kind of forgot that within an hour I was throwing up all over the bathroom. I was messing up the house, but it seemed a small price to pay for the attention I was getting. And it wasn't like I started buying booze then, but something clicked in my head and I went, this connects. You know, I wasn't comfortable with the family that I was with, and I knew that I had to get away from that house. And I did run away from home when I was 44. The body left at 16, but there were 28 years of ransom notes. You know, bail me out of this, bail me out of that. You know, I tried going to college. I was in college. I was 16 years old, and I was trying my best. I couldn't do it. You know, I was drinking to fit in. I was starting to smoke dope, and something happened, and I had to leave. The only thing is, I was in the 60s, and when you left college in the 60s, there weren't a lot of alternatives. And so I was drafted, and they brought me into the draft board down at Whitehall Station, which was the main induction facility for New York. And After talking to me for a little while, the chief psychiatrist said, Pete, you know, this Vietnam thing, it's big. It's big. It's not that big, though. And as a representative of the armed forces, I cannot conceive of there being a threat against the Republic that is serious enough we'd ever need your services. So just get out of here and try not to hurt yourself. And so I took that as a sign, and I went back to, I was now living in Washington, D.C., and I went back to doing the things that I was doing, and I was just drinking and I was using, and every once in a while I'd get a job to pay some bills, and you know, eventually all roads lead out here, so I ended up in California in the entertainment business, and I seemed to fit in just well, and I ended up being very lucky, but there was no amount of luck that was going to relieve me of my alcoholism. That was the great mystery, because I became as successful in a field of entertainment, and I had a big office in Century City, and I had a staff of people who would like report to me in the morning what was going on, and you know, I'd be getting up and smoking a joint, having some coffee, and you know, putting some whiskey in my coffee, rolling into the office about 10 o'clock, doing a couple of lines off my desk while I was briefed by my staff on what had happened. I'd leave about an hour later, go and get drunk at lunch, come back, take a nap in my office. About 4 o'clock, get up, do a couple more lines and leave, and then I'd go out and start taking Quaaludes and drinking and smoking cocaine. You know, that's what film distributors did back then, and they paid me a lot of money. They paid me a lot of money to do that, and you know, and I was living in a little rent-controlled place in Santa Monica, and they'd be turning off the utilities, and I couldn't find my car, and every penny that I got was gone. Didn't matter how much I got. And one day we were having a meeting, and you know, I'd been having trouble staying awake at these meetings, and apparently I came out of a blackout and started calling horses coming down the backstretch at Keeneland Racetrack. And that wasn't what the meeting was about, so they stopped the meeting, and they told me to get help. It was on a Friday, so the next morning I went over to St. John's, and I actually went to the chemical dependence unit, and I told them what was going on. I didn't want them to have my real name because, you know, I already had that thing with the draft board, so I didn't want anything else on my permanent record. So I told them my name was Pete Haskell. You know, it's like a little Lever to Beaver kind of thing. But like most of my plans, I didn't think it all the way through, and I gave them my home address and my Social Security card number and my driver's license, so they knew exactly who I was. You know, I've gone through life with catastrophic solutions for simple problems, you know. So I'm there, and I'm in a big bed now with high bars on it and medication because they don't want me to roll out of it. I'm having seizures, and I get into my paper outfit, and I'm going up and down the hall. And after a couple of days, they take me into this room where they have all these chairs, and they have a big blackboard, and it talks about alcoholism and drug addiction. So I was pretty scared by that room, and I said, so what goes on in here? He says, this is where we have the AA meetings, and we tell each other what our troubles are, and we help each other to recover. And like there was a little switch that clicked off in my head that said, well, then this is where I leave. Because I already know I'm a loser, and I'm not interested in anybody else knowing that I'm a loser. The list is long enough, and so I started planning to get out of that recovery center. So I called him at the office, and I said, listen, wasn't that a hoot? I'll even go to outpatient just so that doesn't happen again, because I don't want to embarrass you guys, but I'll be back Tuesday. And you know, I heard them say they said my name 3 times. When they say your name 3 times, there's nothing good coming after it. You know, it was like Pete, Pete, Pete. We've changed the locks. Accounting's doing the math. If we owe you anything, you'll have it in 72 hours. And try not to hurt yourself. Now, to some, that would have been a perfect opportunity for me to recover. I was already on the ward. Recovery was at hand. I was surrounded by people who had the same problem that I had, but I didn't know it. So I started calling around to see who could help me. And, you know, I couldn't call the family because they weren't interested anymore. There weren't any friends. The only person I could call, I called my dealer. And he said, Pete, I think we can make it through this. And so he was over in about 20 minutes. And he got me going again. And that was in 1981. And I spent the next 11 years telling people that I was sober. I thought it would keep them off my back. And I wasn't sober. And I was going crazy. And my world was getting smaller and smaller. Now, I had a job. I had some important jobs. I had jobs where I had to discipline guys who were getting drunk on the job, which was a little tricky. And I was going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I just didn't want to identify because I was afraid if I identified, someone might come up and say hello, and if they started talking, they'd find out who I was and that I'd been lying, and I didn't want to do that. I asked one guy to sponsor me once, and then I was afraid he was stalking me for like 2 months. You know, I kept peeking out the curtains. Oh, he must be coming looking for me now, you know. And it got bad. But I had a lot of solutions to that. I remember at one time I got Bell's palsy. So the right side of my face was paralyzed. And, you know, I kept looking in the mirror every morning. I'd look in the mirror and I'd try to wink or try to move something. So all I did was move my business over to the side of my mouth where I could still get a drink down and where I could still get a grip on that pipe, you know, because I knew that that was the solution for me. So these meetings were not helping me because I had no idea what was wrong with me. I was real lucky when I heard somebody after I'd been here for a while go, listen, you can beat yourself all you want, but, you know, you don't know till you know. And in 1992, my father suffered a devastating stroke. And I went back to see him, and he couldn't talk, and he couldn't eat. He was being fed through a tube in his side. And he was in his mid-80s. And he said that he communicated that he was going to talk again. And I thought it was the last time I was going to see him. And I thought that the last time I saw him, he was going to see what a loser I was. Because, you know, when you spend 11 years going back to your family, telling your family you're sober, and the only thing you're doing when you're visiting them is detoxing, you're not like the best guest in town. You know, it's like eat a meal, go to sleep, wake up, be grumpy, eat another meal, go to sleep. And that's what my visits were. This is how I thought I was being a member of my family. And so in May of '92, my parents celebrated 50 years of being married, and there was a big party thrown for them and another couple that had gotten married the same day in 1942. And of course, being the you know, functional alcoholic that I am, I didn't even have enough money to fly back for the event. I couldn't contribute to it. I couldn't buy anything for him. And my brother flew me in. My father was walking better than I was. And I was asked to give a testimonial, and I couldn't. I was just too ashamed of where my life had gone. There was a prayer in the beginning of the dinner where my father sliced some bread and said a prayer of thanksgiving with a guttural but clear voice. And my brother, who had become a doctor, in his testimonial said that there was more work for my dad to do, and that God had decided if he had more work to do, he might have a voice to do it better. And that maybe there was a loving God that was looking after him. And, you know, I'd kind of hoped there'd be a loving God that would look after me, but what I had done was I'd created a God in my own image, and it was really pissed at the way I'd squandered away all the gifts I'd had. But I listened, and I went, maybe there's hope for me. And I came back to California. I had another job I had to lose. There was some petty cash issue, I guess. Cash always seemed to be the problem. I'd identify the problem as cash. There was a time in '89, I was vice president of a company. I needed a $1,500 bridge loan from Wednesday to Friday. So I told the owner, listen, I need $1,500. I'll give it back to you Friday with my, when I get paid. And he went, no, Pete, and this was a guy who'd known me for 20 years. He said, I don't know where your money's going, but I'm giving you all this money. I'm giving you a car. I just don't know where it's going. And before I'd started working with him, he said, I've seen you loaded. And if I ever see you loaded, I won't fire you. I'll kill you. So, I knew that he and I weren't going to be having any heart-to-hearts. So I asked him for this money, and he said no. And so that I had another one of my catastrophic solutions where I took the key to the brand-new company car and the key to my office and the key to that building, and I slammed him down on his desk, saying he'd regret the day he let a piece of manpower like me slip through his fingers. And I hit the parking lot in mid-August in Chatsworth. And I felt the heat come up through my shoe and realized I'd just given away the key to my car. But there was no turning back. I had to race home and wait by the phone for that phone call apologizing for his not treating me right. So that one didn't come. Well, one of the things, he told me that I didn't look like I was well kept enough to be like the vice president of this company. And, one of the guys had told me about a cousin who'd fallen in the shower and hit his head on the porcelain and cracked his skull and died. And this is a horrific story. And it put a whole new element of risk into personal hygiene, And it was like I wanted the job, but I wasn't going to die for it. And, if there was a morning I wasn't shaking too bad, I would be glad to shower and shave and put on clean clothes. But, 5 out of 5, come on. That's more than I had in me. So this is what was going on, and then I come back, and it's November 10th, 1992. I didn't have a plan. So I didn't drink anything, I didn't smoke anything, I didn't snort anything. And I was just flopping around the house, and then it was November 11th, and November 12th, and November 13th. I went over to my next-door neighbor and told my neighbor that I'd been lying all those years. I'd been telling her I was sober and would she take me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I kind of braced myself because I figured she might faint from the news. And she wasn't nearly as surprised as I thought she'd be. But she brought me up to the Pacific Palisades on a Sunday morning. There was a meeting that was at 10:30, and it was at Temple. And I thought, here I am, some kid from the Bronx coming up to the Palisades with all these rich folks in a temple. And, there were 2 guys setting up chairs for that meeting. One was a guy named Pons, who I've known my whole sobriety. We're working together again for about the 3rd time. The other guy was a guy named Joel. Joel, as it turned out, lived 3 blocks from me in the Bronx. So there was no mistake. Joel's been, as a matter of fact, tonight I was at a meeting where Joel was speaking. It was a big book study, and we read chapter 5. And it was something here in chapter 5 read with a different person reading each paragraph, because you kind of hear the unity of what happens in Alcoholics Anonymous. That isn't one person. It's like the whole room. The whole room is what works in the magic. But I got there, and I was shaking pretty bad. And there were arms on the chairs. And if there weren't arms on the chairs, I don't think I would have stayed at that meeting, because I was so scared of embarrassing myself. And I was there, and some guy, Jim, said, welcome. You must be tired. I don't know. How would you know something like that? And I wondered if he's the guy who'd been going back and forth on my lawn for the last 9 years. Because I almost got a beat on him once, but he said, no, I just know how much work it is. It's going to be okay. And he gave me his card and his phone number. And I went home that day after hearing a speaker who had nothing in common with me. Her story was different, but something happened, and I didn't know it had happened. I went home, and I went to sleep, and I didn't pick up that day. And on Thursday, I waited a few days because I wasn't quite sure I trusted you guys, because I knew I had a lot of baggage, and I'd heard about these steps, and I didn't know how you guys were going to handle my telling you that I hadn't been faithful to you. And I called him, and I met him up at Brentwood at the beginners meeting, and the next night I met my best friend Jim, who I'd now known for 5 days and talked to about 4 times, and Bobby, and we went into the basement of the church, in Santa Monica where the Jewish kid from the Bronx asked the Greek guy from California to help me find God. Because obviously I was going to need God. And they sat on either side of me so I wouldn't shake too much. When I stood up as a newcomer, I got passed a piece of paper saying, "Welcome to the Solution," and it was signed Israel, and there was a phone number on it. Seemed like that would be an important piece of paper, so I folded it and I put it in my pocket and held on to it. And I started coming to meetings. I'd go to 3 meetings a day. I would go in the morning, I would go at noon, I'd go at night. I didn't have a job. I'd go to a meeting, I'd go home, I'd go to sleep, I'd go to another meeting, I'd go home, I'd go to sleep, I'd go to another meeting. I didn't know how well I was doing. I only knew how I was feeling. And I think that that's probably the toughest thing being new around here is that you know, I've always associated feeling bad with doing bad. And around here, if you're feeling bad, it means you're growing. So it's like a good thing. So, and the other thing is it'll pass, which I didn't know it would pass. I thought I had to take quick response to not feeling good. And so I'm around and this guy Jim and Bobby, who sat on the other side of me, Bobby's telling me I got to get on my knees. And I go, "Man, I can't do the knee thing. You know, I'm a Jewish kid." And he said, "Pete, you know, God looks down when he sees a Jewish guy on his knees, man. He recognizes the magnitude of his dilemma. And it'll be okay." So I got on my knees. And, you know, I haven't had to pick up since I got on my knees, because I think what the action was accepting that there was a God bigger than any God that I knew. I was turning myself over to a spirit of the universe, and because I couldn't have a God that's like, this is my God, and that's somehow I just needed to turn myself over to the spirit of the universe. And so I'm coming around, and after 50 days, keen mind that I have, I know it's not working. Now, I'd never been sober 50 days. It was a friggin' miracle that I was sober 50 days, but I decided that it wasn't working. I didn't know then it was my disease talking to me. But I went to see Israel. We sat down, and I signed a contract on page 60 in the Big Book, where it says that no human power could relieve me of my alcoholism, but God could and would if he were sought. And I signed that contract on January 3rd, 1993. That I was going to trust that there was a God that could restore me to sanity, and I was going to take the actions that I'd take if there was such a God. And it meant that I had to write an inventory, and I had to tell him the stuff that I was too embarrassed to tell anybody. And I wrote one of those inventories where I wrote the stuff I was going to tell him. Then I wrote the stuff that I would tell him based on how he took the other stuff. And then there was the stuff that I was too afraid to write, lest somebody break into my house and steal my inventory, because now I was an important guy, being sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I met him, and, you know, I'd been going to these meetings where I'd hear people talk about sharing their inventory at the beach or at the Self-Realization Fellowship or in the woods or on a mountain. And, you know, Israel had a spiritual place for me to share my inventory with him. And it was at a table at the McDonald's at 2nd and Colorado on 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning after the Venice Beach Group's Saturday morning meeting. And we got down on our knees, and I held his hand with one hand and I held the Big Book with the other. He did the same, and we said the 3rd step prayer together. And what I did was I took the 3rd step that day when I risked telling Israel, whose approval I thought my sobriety depended upon, because he was my sponsor. And I thought if I told him stuff and he went, "You know, you're right, you are a loser. It's been nice, good luck." You know, I told him that stuff that I'd been carrying all alone. And he shared about his life, and I wasn't so alone anymore. I became part of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was able to sit in my seat during the meeting. I was able to breathe instead of holding my breath, being afraid someone was going to ask me what was going on in my life. And, you know, we set out to see what kind of repair we could do. And the first time I flew back to see my parents, I wanted to make an amends. I was doing it on my dime now. And, you know, I was reading Chuck C's A New Pair of Glasses. The movie on the flight was Legends of the Fall. Here I was the prodigal son coming home. It was all going to be okay. you know, and I was home for about a half hour, and I told my mother, get off the cross. We don't need the wood. You know. If you're new, that's not a suggested amends in Alcoholics Anonymous. Please. That's not considered loving or compassionate, you know. What I had done was I had tried to do these things in my order. I had tried to say, now I'm sober, now I'll take care of everything, and I'll do it on my own will. Because I remember when I had about 65 days, I'd called my family, and I'd said, listen, I'm sober now, this is great, it's all going to be okay. And I expected them to, you know, get right on board with me. And instead, they had the nerve to say, so how long have you been lying to us? And, you know, I said, hey, you know, boundaries here, you know. You're violating your boundary. We may never be able to talk again because I have to be sober and you're making me feel bad about myself. The answer to the question was 11 years. That was the correct answer to the question, but I didn't have the courage to give that answer. So I came back and I did some more work. And I went back and I made an amends to my father. And he was pretty sick by now. He was about 86, and he used to say, I can't walk, I can't talk, I can't hear real well. He was legally blind, but he kept being sent a driver's license in the mail every year, which we got a kick out of. He said, so I can't walk, I can't talk, I can't hear, I can't see, but I'm grateful for what I've got. And I'm making an amends to him for the things that I've done, being the son that I felt had disappointed him so dramatically. And he looked at me and he said, you know, son, I've been a doctor for 60 years. I've devoted my life to treating people's illness. And I've had to watch my son die in front of my eyes for the last 30 years. And Alcoholics Anonymous has done for my son what I have never been able to do. And I am very grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous because my son is alive. And I had no idea any of that stuff was going on, you know, because I'm always too busy thinking about myself. A couple of years later, there was a wedding of one of our relatives, and folks asked if I'd come back and drive them. And, you know, now I was an important guy, you know, I had a job and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, I called Israel. I said, listen, what do you think I ought to do? And he said, well, why did you call me? So I knew what I was supposed to do. And I went back and we got off the highway and we drove on little country roads. And we spent a day of the family being the family with my parents and their 2 sons and my brother's family. And that night we were all in tuxedos and the women were in formal gowns. And it was a magical experience. And, you know, I came back here, and 2 weeks later, my father rolled out of bed one night, and he broke his hip. My brother said, don't worry, you can come in a couple of days, wait till he gets stabilized. And he didn't make it through the night. I never would have had the experience of being with my family if I'd made that decision on my own. I found out when I was here that anybody in this room could be more objective about my life than I could, and that I had to seek counsel. Now, my father was a doctor. He got a second opinion. I didn't want a second opinion on anything. I wanted to go through my life, seldom right, but never in doubt. You know? The thing that makes an idea perfect is that it germinated between my ears. And I had no idea that was the problem. So I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I've had one of those heads. I'm the alcoholic of the leaky head variety. You know, this is my 3rd meeting tonight. I had just left that big book study and was driving home when Dave called and reminded me that this is where I was supposed to be tonight. And I'm going to feel great when I get home. But tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be an alcoholic all over again. And the stuff that I did today is great for today, but I've got stuff to do tomorrow morning. And what I do now is I get on my knees, not because I have to, but because it gives me a sense of comfort to get out of control early. And I say those prayers. I have a bunch of books that I read because I have to do that, because I have to remind myself what it was like. Because now that I'm sober and now that my life has gotten bigger, I've built a new agenda on how people are supposed to take care of me. And, you know, in one of the books I read, the writing a few days ago was by Carlos Castaneda. Now, I remember reading Carlos Castaneda teachings to Don Juan when I was smoking the big smoke and the little smoke. And I was going, wow, Carlos Castaneda, recovery book, whoa. What he talked about was self-importance and our ego. And if I have this feeling of self-importance, I have no choice but to go through my day being offended by nearly everyone. Like somehow I'm the shit and this thing is about me. You know, my life right now, on my best day, I'm as kind as the people were who took me into that first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and said, just come on in and rest, man. It's going to be okay. You may not know it's going to be okay, but we know it's going to be okay because we've been here. And though there have been challenges during my sobriety, and there have been some things that didn't go my way at all, and I had health problems, and I had I had a lot of problems. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous has a solution for all of those. Usually the solution is getting another opinion and finding a truth and trusting that, you know, you have not been singled out for disaster. You know, I'm not that important that God has to single me out to mess with me. But the last thing I'll say is what I was told when I came in, if you're new, that the gates of heaven may not open and welcome you in, but the gates of hell are going to open and let you out. And we're the gatekeepers. We're the ones here to just welcome you in. Whatever you're feeling, if you're having a problem, let someone know. Let someone know. We might have a better solution. Thanks a lot for letting me share with you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.